Well, it's hard not to be, kind of a cheeseball about it, but, something cosmic going on at the old course.
Yeah.
Wolfie, we're going back to the old course this year, baby.
We're going back there, and the U.S. is overwhelming favorites, and it kind of makes you wonder what we're walking into again. Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Office Hours. I'm your host, Michael Wolf. Office Hours presented by Holderness and Bourne. Today we're joined in the classroom by our good friend, Mr. DJ Pyhowski, making his first appearance.
Wolfie, happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me. We've got a lot to talk about with regards to the Walker Cup, an event that I'm headed to in a couple weeks. I'm really excited for it, and I really don't know all that much about it. So it's good timing, my man.
DJ, I'm here to help. Things have been getting a little loose on campus lately. We haven't seen Neil in months. We got Tron Carter eating at some of the worst restaurants in America. We got the big guy going to some concert of some girl I've never heard of before in my life. Anyway, it's time to get back to the basics, and there is nothing more fundamental to golf in the last 100 years, in my opinion, than the Walker Cup. It's the best event in golf.
You've said that like 5 times on 5 different episodes.
I may have told the class that the Masters was my favorite tournament of the year. That was a lie. My favorite tournament is the Open Championship.
The Masters is the best event in golf. The Open's the best event in golf. Now it's the Walker Cup is the best event in golf.
Yeah. I'm a whore for ratings. I don't know what to tell you. The Walker Cup really is the best. It's nobody's making any money off of this deal. All the stuff that's been going on with golf over the last year, this is one of the last things left that's pretty pure.
Well, why don't we start with just the basics? Like, what is it, right? Like, for somebody who's never heard of it, it's a team competition. We know that. Yep. Just who's playing in it? Give me all the basic details here.
Okay, Walker Cup is the best amateur golfers in the United States versus the best amateur golfers from GB&I. It's only played over 2 days. The format's changed a million times. There were 36-hole matches. It's pretty much settled on now. They play foursomes or alternate shots in the morning, and they play singles in the afternoon. And everybody plays now. There's 4 foursomes matches, so 2 guys sit out the alt shot, and then everybody plays singles in the afternoon. It is under the auspices of the USGA and the R&A, and that's different than the professional version, which is the Ryder Cup, of course, which is run by the PGA of America and by kind of a consortium of golf tours over in Europe. And that creates a couple of differences because the R&A organizes it. They use only alternate shot. They don't use best ball. R&A doesn't play best ball.
Which is awesome, by the way.
Which is awesome. And it's also, on the downside, maybe, is that it's still just GB&I. So the Walker Cup has never been expanded to the continental Europe.
Is there any reason why they haven't expanded it? Why they've kept it to just GB&I?
I think it's just because the R&A, organizes things pretty much under the GB&I. I mean, there would be a question of, I guess, where do you end it? Would it be the rest of the world versus the U.S.? Funnily enough, the original intent of the Walker Cup, as envisioned by George Herbert Walker, the grandfather and great-grandfather of our presidents, that guy, he was the USGA president in 1920 when the Walker Cup started to kind of percolate, the idea for it. The original idea was going to be that it was going to be a trophy that was donated, and there were going to be teams from every country in the world. This was, 1920, not too far in the aftermath of World War I. A lot of countries, that even the ones that played golf, just weren't in a position either financially or organizationally to determine who their best amateurs were and to fund a team.
And it kind of seems like, just from scrolling through Wikipedia pages and history and upcoming sites and all that, it seems like the golf course is kind of first and foremost with this event. Is that right?
They get their pick. They get their pick of the cream of the crop. I mean, it's the Cypress Points and the Hoy Lakes and the Royal County Downs and Pine Valleys. A couple of reasons for that. It's a very minimal impact event. There's no grandstands. It's one of the better events you can attend. Tickets this year are £35 for 2 days over the old course, and there's no stands, and you can walk wherever you want. I mean, you walk right behind the fairway and watch the players. And these days, every great young star in America or GB&I is participating in the Walker Cup. So it's a bargain, and it's also a chance to see some really good golf courses.
Well, let's get into a little history.
So 1920, Great Britain's coming out of World War I. And again, we need to keep in mind, us Americans, that World War One was a much bigger deal for Great Britain as far as its impact. They had, I think, 6 British amateurs in a row that were canceled. Here in the United States, there were only 2 U.S. amateurs canceled, so the impact was huge. 1920, the R&A golf trying to kind of get back on their feet. As part of reorganization of the R&A post-World War One, they established what was called the Competitions Committee. So the guy who was in charge of it was this guy named Norman Bowes, who was a real unsung hero in the world of St. Andrews and R&A and kind of old school golf. Bowes ran the Competitions Committee for a couple of decades. They also held a big meeting with the USGA. George Herbert Walker and others from the USGA attended at the 1920 Amateur that was held at Muirfield. At that point, the idea was proposed to host an amateur team competition. They were still fiddling around with that in 1920. By the time we get to 1921, William Founds. So if you've heard his name before, that is the heir to the Founds steel magnet fortunes, the guys that built Oakmont. They were also good golfers. Founds was 1910 U.S. amateur champion. He was gung-ho on team golf. So he was the one who was like paying for and organizing and bugging his buddies, all the top golfers, to get together and saying, we need to make golf a team sport. A little bit of a deja vu to what's been going on 100 years later. Fonz really believed that there was an attractiveness to playing teams, and especially international team golf events. By the time 1921 rolls along, Fonz talks 7 of his buddies into sailing over to England to play in the British Amateur, which was going to be at Hoylake, and then to stick around and play in the Open, which was going to be at St. Andrews that year. So Fonz recruits a couple of his buddies. They're pretty good golfers. It's Chick Evans, it's Francis Ouimet, it's a young 19-year-old guy named Bobby Jones. They basically arranged to set up the first team match of what would become the Walker Cup. They're on the boat, and it takes them 7 days to get over to England, and Fonz has a chance to basically twist everybody's arms on the boat and say, hey, let's play a team match. Instead of just playing warm-up rounds or practice rounds for the amateur, why don't we play, make it kind of a team competition in the build-up. So they send a cable from the ship over to Hoylake, and the Hoylake guys get it. The R&A gets it and says, well, we were already going to do something like this with Scotland. We already kind of have an informal, match that we play back and forth between Scotland and England. But they felt like, and again, you got to view this in the context of coming out of World War One. They felt really an indebtedness to Americans that had fought by their sides and contributed to the later stages of World War One, and so that's what the R&A felt like they needed to do. They set aside the planned match versus Scotland, and they turned it into what was essentially the first Walker Cup. It probably also doesn't hurt that it had been quite a while since pre-World War One, since they had seen any American golfers play, and there was still an assumption that this was very much a Great Britain game, and that all the best players were in Great Britain. So they probably did not know what they were walking into, which was the blades of a propeller. Basically, U.S. goes out. They win all 4 alternate shots the first time the match is played. They win the match 9-3 in total. Several of the the matches are not very close. It was an eye opener for the Brits. But they decide, hey, let's go forward with it. This is they recognize, I think, pretty early on, this is going to be a good thing. So the U.S. immediately invites them back for the second version. By now, they've had time to get the thing more organized and get the trophy made, all that stuff. So 1922 is considered the first official Walker Cup. The 1921 one is not included, but that was certainly the build-in. So in 22, they play at National Golf Links of America in the U.S. They return to the old course and play in 1923, and then they play another one in 1924 at Garden City. Pretty quickly, they realize, hey, it's back and forth year after year is going to be too expensive, and there's not enough guys because they're still doing this by steamship. So they decide, hey, rather than play it every year, alternating home and away, let's play it every other year. So that's where we are today. It's played every 2 years, and so obviously it's hosted in the United States just once every 4 years. So we're going to the Walker Cup this year. My wife's going for the first time to St. Andrews. She's excited. It'll be fantastic. One of our friends is actually playing in the Walker Cup, so we'll be cheering him on. I'm going to be doing so in my Holderness and Bourne shirt. I think these things are made for the Walker Cup. They're quality. They're another thing I like about the Walker Cup, they always get the uniforms well. They never screw up the uniforms with maroon and beige and yellow. It's red, white, and blue. It's not that hard. And I think a lot of times I think holiness and born kind of the same thing. I mean, they keep it between the mustard and the mayo. All their stuff, they kind of, they pour the value into the quality of the builds and the manufacture. I'm wearing the Burton long sleeve. Just feels very Walker Cup-ish. Walker Cup is traditionally played in the fall, but your navies, your light blues, your whites, their patterns are all, I think timeless is probably the right word.
You look like you're ready to sit out on the deck and have a toasty in that thing,
I
Wolfie.
wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm going full H&B as well, man. I haven't, I don't usually get this nice and dressed up for work in the office here, but it was a nice change of pace to put on such a high quality piece. So thank you to H&B for their support of office hours. And when you see us out at the Walker Cup, that's exactly what we're going to be wearing. So let's get back to it. I want to know, what do I need to know about George Herbert Walker? How did he get into golf? How did he become the namesake for this thing? Obviously overshadowed by some of his progeny. But what should we know about the man himself?
So they were the Walkers, I guess, were based in St. Louis at the time. St. Louis Country Club is one of the few golf courses that was built by C.B. Macdonald. Walker was in that crew with C.B. Macdonald and J.P. Morgan and kind of that crowd. I mean, it was that level. I don't know if he had that level of wealth that J.P. Morgan had, but definitely he ran around with kind of that National Golf Links of America crowd, the founders really of the game in the United States. He was the president of the USGA in 1920 and 1921 when this was done.
How does competition kind of shake out once we get things rolling? I mean, is it pretty balanced between the two teams, or how does kind of some of the how does the scoreboard look once we get into this thing?
Okay, that's a good question, DJ. So the answer is, if you live on the other side of the pond, is not very well at all. The U.S. wins the first 9 occasions that the Walker Cup is held. Most of them are just blowouts. In Chicago in 1928, they win 11-1. Royal St. George's in 1930, they win 10-2. Pine Valley 1936, they win 10-1. And again, it's Bobby Jones, it's Francis Ouimet, it's Chick Evans. These are pretty strong golfers. It needs to be noted for history. There's always a big question of who was lost on the battlefield. Who were the fatalities in World War I that would have gone on to be good players? I always think a poignant moment when you go into clubhouses in Great Britain and Ireland is you see the plaque of those who gave their lives to World War I and World War II, and it's not unusual to see their club championship boards, and you'll see a young man who won in 1914 and 1915 and 1916. He was the club champion, and then you never see his name on the board anymore, and you think, man. What was the rest of that story? It probably didn't end pleasantly.
So I guess in that regard, then, was it, you think of it today as like kind of this big competition, and there's a little bit more infrastructure and TV and stuff set up around it, but is this more just kind of like a camaraderie thing at this point, or is it?
Nope. Pretty big deal.
Really?
The first one, the British Amateur at Hoylake, and the team match that preceded it was a very big deal. Big crowds. I mean, they were starved for sports. They were starved for entertainment, and people wanted to see action. People wanted to see the stars that they hadn't been able to see. And then there's no question as well that the draw of guys like Bobby Jones became huge for the crowds in later years, that they wanted to see these guys play. A tradition that's been lost. I don't know why it's been lost. I've never heard a good answer for it. They used to always play the Walker Cup right before the British Amateur as well, so that all the top stars in the United States, at least the top 8 or 10 guys, they would go over and they would stay for 2 weeks. And I think it's a shame that that's not done anymore.
All right, so you said the U.S. won the first 9, which begs the question: what happened in the 10th? There's got to be a story there.
Yeah. So the 10th is 1938. It's played at St. Andrews, and again, it's a poignant moment for the Great Brits, especially the war drums were beating. There is a sense that this will probably be the last one held for a while, or at least there's a lot up in the air about what's going on in Great Britain in 1938. Against all odds, so they host the thing at the old course. The wind picks up a little bit, and against all odds, they get it done. 1938, first time ever they win the thing. It's at the home of golf. There's this wonderful scene that we'll show right now where the trophy's handed over on the steps of the RNA, right in their backyard there, and both sides kind of joining and singing, and this song and the crowd does, and it's it's very poignant. I mean, everybody's smiling and happy, but there's also the background of the fact that a lot of these young men are probably going to be headed off to war, at least on the Great Britain side, and it's going to be, it's going to be a while before the two sides get back together. And there seems to be some acknowledgement on that, at least, subconsciously. So they get the win in 1938. There's no Walker Cup for 9 years. When it picks back up, it's more American domination. And again, for a lot of the same reasons. In the United States, post-World War II was the boom years. In Great Britain and Ireland, they're still trying to, put an economy back together. And in a lot of cases for the soldiers and the families trying to put their lives back together. So maybe not so much of a fair fight. It's reflected in the scores. There was one tie in 1965, but other than that, the U.S. wins 12 more Walker Cups in a row. So they win 21 out of the first 22 Walker Cups. The U.S. wins.
Well, why did they keep going?
Yeah.
I mean, is that a stupid question? Like, what?
Yeah.
What fun is that to keep?
Because that's what you do. Because that's what, right? I think that's part of the golf personality. It's all of us. Why do we keep playing this silly game? Why do they keep playing this? Because why do you root for the Cincinnati Bearcats in football? Because when it finally happens that one time in 50 years, the payoff is immense. And for them, 1971 was that payoff. So the team is still made up basically of older gentlemen. There's not as much of a college system, and they're trying to play against these college studs of Tom Kite and Lanny Watkins and names like that are playing in Walker Cups in 1970s. 1971, they bring the thing back to the old course again. Kind of the same thing where there's some weather, and the U.S. Thinks that they're probably going to win it pretty easily. Why wouldn't they? They've won 21 of the last 22. Michael Bonalac is the captain. Bonalac goes on to become just a legendary player within, on the scene in Great Britain and Ireland, and then he's the head of the RNA for, 15, 20 years. But Bonalac is he's a great golfer. He captains that 1971 team. They jump off to a 4-0 start. They come down the stretch for the first time ever. Everything goes their way. Most of these matches are ending on the 18th hole. They win them all. They get it done in the clutch. And there's it happened apparently very quickly. There was a lot of back and forth on the last several holes, and without modern scorekeeping technology and stuff, they weren't exactly sure where they were. And then all of a sudden they win in 1971. Another kind of poignant moment of that, probably the greatest Walker Cup player in history, is this Irish guy named Joe Carr. Joe Carr played in 9 different Walker Cups. He never turned pro. He had a large family. He plays in 9 Walker Cups. They lose all of them. He's the captain twice. They lose all those. Flash forward, his son Roddy is playing in the 1971 Walker Cup. The only one Roddy plays in, I think, and secures one of the big points at the end. He wins 3.5 of his 4 matches, and the dad gets to see the son right there on the 18th hole of the St. Andrews Old Course, winning the thing for only the second time in the first 21 times it's played. So
it's hard not to be kind of a cheeseball about it, but something cosmic going on at the Old Course.
Yeah,
Wolfie, we're going back to the Old Course this year, baby.
We're going back there, and the U.S. is overwhelming favorites, and it kind of makes you wonder what we're walking into again. So we'll see. U.S. gets back on their horse. They win 8 more in a row. So now we've got 29 out of 31, right? The tide finally changes, and by now we're up to modern times. You're going to start recognizing some of these names. So we've won 29 out of the 31 that have been played. The only 2 losses that the U.S. team has are both on the Old Course in St. Andrews. 1989, we decide as a kind of a tribute to Bobby Jones, and in the interest of moving the event around a little bit, we bring it to the deep south of America for the first time ever, to Peachtree, home of Bobby Jones. This is 1989. Fred Ridley is the team captain for the United States, Mr. Ridley of Augusta National Chairman fame now. And one of the youngest guy on the team is a rookie Walker Cup player named Phil Mickelson. The U.S., as you can probably guess by the big grin I have, we lose on American soil for the first time in the 60 years that this event's been held. Great Britain goes into the final day. There's 8 matches. There's still 8 singles matches at the time. They only need 1.5 points out of the 8 on the last day. So they only need 3 ties or 1 win and 1 tie. At the halfway point, they're losing in all 8 matches. So they're right there. They're on the cusp. They're about to choke the thing away. And then the final match, the poor British guy is 3 down with 3 holes left, or 2 down with 3 holes left. He wins 16. He holds out on 17. They come to 18. Everybody's watching, and the match ends with a halve on 18 for the critical half point. So they finally win in the United States, 1989, for the first time ever. And that really ushers in the modern era. So since 1989, the next 14 matches we split 7-7, and from then on, it completely changes. I think there's also a shift in more and more great players from Great Britain and Ireland are coming over and playing for American colleges. The whole idea of the way they organize their system over in Great Britain and their selection committee and things like that, it becomes far less of an old boys network. And again, you're hearing a lot of parallels to this. If you're a Ryder Cup fan and you don't know a lot about the Walker Cup, there are a ton of parallels. It's like everything that the Ryder Cup comes up with, the Walker Cup, experienced 25 years earlier, it seems like. And that's really what happened starting in '89 was that they not only did they get better, but they just got more organized with practices and preparation and everything else. So we split 7 in a row. We've won the last 3 in a row. But since 1991, so in the last 30 years, we've only won on the road twice. Once was at Royal County Down when we picked off Rory's team on their home soil at Royal County Down, and that's the one that was just murderers.
That was like Billy Horschel and
DJ, Colt Knost, Chris Kirk. I think we had, of our 10 guys, I think 8 of the 10 have won a PGA Tour event, and we get it done in the last hole, one of the last matches, to beat Rory's team 12.5 to 11.5. But other than that, the only other time we've won on the road in the last 20 years was the last time it was played in Great Britain, which was at Hoylake. So we've won 3 in a row, but overall, it's pretty much been a pretty evenly matched contest since Peachtree in 1989. And I would expect this year's Walker Cup to do the same thing.
Yeah, I feel like you've sincerely got me pretty fired up for this event. This is going to be awesome.
Watching them in person is great. It's like going to a U.S. Amateur or Curtis Cup, where just being able to follow along with players and kind of watch. And because there's so few matches, and because it's only 2 days long, I mean, really from the get-go, it's like every point matters. Another thing I like of the Walker Cup versus Ryder Cup is they play singles both days, both afternoons. And so that leads to the, are you going to rematch the guy that, you beat the day before? I mean, there's all kinds of famous ones of, an amateur that was being outdriven by Tiger Woods by 100 yards, but he beats him. And, are they going to play him again the second day? And
well, let's land the plane here with your favorite. Any fun facts? I know Neil's always asking for fun facts at the end.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff on the Walker Cups out there. A lot of the old matches, the USGA has posted a lot of their stuff on YouTube. If you're interested more on the early history of it, there's a nice YouTube video. It's just called The Genesis of the Walker Cup. It was put out by the R&A. It's on their World Golf History channel. It's just called The Genesis of the Walker Cup, and it's really good. There's also one really good book on the Walker Cup. It's been re-updated a few times after the last couple of matches. It's by Gordon Simmons, and it's just called The Walker Cup by Gordon Simmons. And it's a great book that kind of covers the ins and outs and a lot of good characters in the early years as well. So both of those are worth doing.
Anything else we need to get to?
No. Enjoy it. There's some of it's being live streamed. There will be a couple of hours that are put together on the NBC family of broadcast partners. It scares me to say that, but catch what you can, and it's a great event. Get involved in the Walker Cup.
Awesome, Wolfie. Thanks, man. We'll be back soon. This was a fantastic one. Thanks for all the research, and I guess go USA or go GB and I. I don't really know which one I'm rooting for. Rooting for history.
I'll see you in St. Andrews.